Amidst the gleaming floors and sterile artificial lighting of Terminal C at JFK International Airport, destiny unveils its most delicious twists in plain sight. Meet Alina Morales, a brilliant business strategist disguised in a cleaning lady's uniform, about to teach the arrogant crew of Skyward Airlines the most valuable lesson of their careers. Appearances, as it turns out, can be devastatingly deceptive. Alina moved silently through the first-class cabin of the Boeing 787, her sharp eyes absorbing every detail. The flight crew barely acknowledged her presence, oblivious to the fact that in just a matter of days she would be their new CEO. They had no idea that every sneer, every dismissive glance, was being meticulously catalogued by the woman who would soon hold their futures in her hands. The first time David Mitchell rolled his eyes at her broken English, Alina simply smiled. The second time Brittany Parker scoffed at her uniform, Alina nodded politely. But when Jason Taylor spilled coffee on her freshly mopped floor, the die was cast. Alina Morales wasn't just coming for their jobs, she was coming for the entire toxic culture they embodied. This isn't just a story about power and prejudice. It's about the sweet, undeniable satisfaction of justice served at 39,000 feet. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal C cast harsh shadows across Alina's face as she scrubbed the bathroom sink. At 42, her hands were rough, worn by years of unnoticed labor, work that only mattered when it wasn't done. She straightened her back, feeling the familiar ache between her shoulder blades, and checked her watch. 2 more hours until her shift ended, and then she could go home to her modest apartment in Queens. But today wasn't just another day of invisible labor. Today was day 3 of her undercover assignment as the executive consultant for Skyward Airlines' new parent company, Globe Trend Enterprises. Nobody at Skyward knew that the cleaning lady with a slight accent held an MBA from Harvard and had successfully turned around 3 failing companies in the past decade. No one knew that Alina Morales was methodically evaluating every aspect of Skyward's operations before deciding whether to accept the position as their new CEO. "Excuse me," a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. A flight attendant, impeccably dressed in a pristine Skyward Airlines uniform, stood in the doorway. Her blonde hair was tied back in a perfect bun, red lips curled in impatience. Her name tag read Brittany Parker. "This bathroom needs to be ready now. We have first-class passengers arriving for the London flight," Brittany snapped, barely looking at Alina as she spoke, her attention already drifting to her phone. "Yes, miss, almost finished," Alina replied, intentionally thickening her accent. "Almost isn't good enough. This is Skyward Airlines, not some budget carrier," Brittany responded, her eyes finally flickering to Alina's face, her disdain barely concealed. "We have standards." Alina nodded, her expression a carefully crafted mask of submission, while in her mind she was cataloging every detail of the interaction. Brittany's treatment of service staff, her prioritization of appearance over genuine customer care, and her casual cruelty. As Brittany walked away, Alina discreetly made a note on her phone. In her other role, she kept meticulous digital files on every employee she encountered. Brittany Parker had just earned her own folder. 3 hours later, Alina changed into jeans and a simple blouse in the employee locker room. She pulled her thick black hair from its practical bun, letting it fall in waves around her shoulders. With her cleaning uniform stowed in her bag, she looked like an entirely different person. Because that was precisely the point. She headed toward Gate 27, where Skyward's flagship London flight would soon depart. The first-class lounge gleamed with opulence, and Alina walked confidently toward the entrance. "Excuse me, ma'am." A male flight attendant stepped in front of her, blocking her path. His name tag read David Mitchell, his expression cool and professional. This area is for first-class passengers only." Alina smiled and reached into her handbag, pulling out a first-class ticket and her passport. "I am aware," she replied smoothly. David's eyes widened slightly as he examined her credentials. "I apologize, Miss Morales. I didn't realize you were a passenger." Alina's smile deepened as she observed his discomfort grow. "Please, enjoy the lounge," he said, stepping aside. But as she passed, she noticed the slight narrowing of his eyes, almost as if he were trying to place where he had seen her before. Inside the lounge, Alina chose a seat with a clear view of both the gate and the staff area. She opened her laptop and began reviewing the confidential files Globe Trend had provided on Skyward's financial situation. The airline had been struggling for years, bleeding cash while its executives collected enormous bonuses. Customer satisfaction had plummeted, and employee turnover was at an all-time high. Behind the glossy marketing campaigns and sleek uniforms, Skyward was a company in crisis. Alina's job? To either save it or dismantle it. A burst of laughter drew her attention to a group of Skyward employees near the staff entrance. David Mitchell was there, along with several flight attendants and what appeared to be a pilot. The man at the center of the group stood slightly taller than the others. His captain's uniform was immaculate, and his salt-and-pepper hair only added to his distinguished appearance. "Captain James Richardson," Alina murmured to herself, recognizing him from the personnel files. 58 years old, 25 years with Skyward, and according to multiple reports, one of the most respected and feared figures in the company. His record was spotless, his technical skills unquestioned, but there were whispers about his management style and how he treated certain staff members. As if sensing her gaze, Captain Richardson looked up, his eyes meeting hers across the lounge. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by the practiced smile of a man accustomed to first-class passengers. He nodded politely before turning back to his colleagues. Alina returned to her laptop, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. Captain Richardson would be flying the London route today. It would be the perfect opportunity to observe him in action, alongside the rest of the crew. Boarding will begin in 15 minutes for Skyward Airlines Flight 237 to London Heathrow, a voice over the PA system announced. First class and priority passengers may begin boarding at this time. Alina closed her laptop and gathered her belongings. As she approached the gate, she saw Brittany Parker standing at the priority boarding lane, scanning tickets with mechanical efficiency. When Alina handed over her boarding pass, Brittany didn't even look up. "Welcome aboard, Miss Morales," Brittany said with a practiced smile. "Enjoy your flight." "Thank you, Brittany," Alina replied deliberately, using the flight attendant's name. Brittany's head snapped up, confusion momentarily crossing her features before her professional mask slipped back into place. "You're in Seat 2A. David will show you to your seat on board." David Mitchell greeted passengers with practiced charm, but when he saw Alina, there was a brief hesitation, a momentary furrow of his brow. "This way, Miss Morales," he said, gesturing toward the aisle. "May I take your coat?" "No, thank you," Alina replied. "I'll keep it with me." David nodded and led her to her seat, a spacious first-class pod with all the luxury amenities Skyward advertised in its glossy brochures. As he moved away to fetch her drink, Alina discreetly observed the other crew members preparing for departure. A younger flight attendant, helping an elderly passenger stow his luggage, displayed patience and kindness that immediately caught Alina's attention. Just before the boarding door closed, Captain Richardson emerged from the cockpit to welcome the first-class passengers. His presence commanded immediate attention. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Captain James Richardson, and I'll be flying you to London today," he announced, his voice carrying the easy authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Our cruising altitude will be 39,000 feet, and with favorable winds we should arrive slightly ahead of schedule. The weather in London is partly cloudy with a temperature of 18 degrees Celsius. On behalf of myself and First Officer Samantha Chen, welcome aboard Skyward Airlines." Alina watched as he moved through the cabin, shaking hands with select passengers and exchanging brief pleasantries. When he reached her seat, his smile remained fixed, but Alina detected the slightest hint of scrutiny in his gaze. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. Is this your first time flying with Skyward?" he asked. "No," Alina replied, her smile genuine but guarded, "but it's been a while." "Well, we're delighted to have you back. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask." As he continued down the aisle, Alina turned her attention to her phone, quickly typing a few observations before flight mode would be required. Captain Richardson was charismatic and professional. There was no denying that. But there was something else about him. Something beneath the polished exterior that Alina couldn't quite place. She would have 7 hours to figure it out. The flight departed on schedule, and as the aircraft descended into the sky, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that the dynamics aboard this flight were anything but simple. From David's obvious elitism to Brittany's mechanical indifference and May's genuine kindness, the crew's behavior spoke volumes about Skyward's culture, and Alina knew exactly how to fix it. Alina smoothly shifted the conversation back to safer ground, her tone lightening. "Well, it seems that in any organization, the path to success is rarely straightforward. Whether it's in aviation or corporate consulting, people are often overlooked for reasons beyond their abilities." Richardson nodded, visibly relieved by the change in topic. "You're right about that. There are a lot of factors at play: politics, timing, even luck. But at the end of the day, results matter." Alina smiled, agreeing with him. "That's true. Results are what drive any successful team, but the environment in which those results are achieved matters just as much. Excellence is a product of not just talent, but a supportive, fair atmosphere where everyone has the chance to thrive." Richardson gave her a thoughtful look. "You speak as though you're describing something idealistic, Miss Morales. We both know that's not always how it works in the real world." "Perhaps," Alina replied, "but I believe that's what makes the companies that endure, the ones that rise above, stand apart. They cultivate environments where everyone can excel, not just the select few." Richardson didn't respond immediately, his gaze distant as he considered her words. Alina let the silence stretch, giving him time to process. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer than before. "Maybe you're right. It's hard to change something that's been in place for so long, something that's worked, at least in the short term." Alina leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Change is hard, yes, but it's also necessary. Without it, even the most successful organizations will eventually stagnate. Look at Skyward. The cracks are already showing. The question is, are you ready to be part of the solution?" The challenge was subtle but clear, and Richardson seemed to catch it. He took another sip of his water, his expression unreadable. "We'll see. I'm not one to back down from a challenge, Miss Morales." Alina nodded, the smallest smile tugging at her lips. "I look forward to seeing how you rise to it, Captain. Everyone can make a difference, especially those who lead by example." The rest of their dinner passed with lighter conversation, but both knew the real matter had already been addressed. Alina had planted the seed of change, and now it was up to Richardson and the rest of the team to decide whether to let it grow. As they parted ways at the end of the evening, Elena felt the familiar stir of anticipation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was prepared. She was not just a consultant, she was an agent of change, and Skyward Airlines was about to experience a transformation, whether they were ready for it or not. She spoke with a calm yet assured tone. Every organization has its own criteria for advancement, but in my experience, the formal criteria often don't align with the actual factors that influence key decisions. This caused a shift in their conversation, gently steering it away from the specifics of Skyward's operations toward a broader discussion of organizational dynamics. By the time dinner had ended, Elena had gained significant insight into Captain Richardson's leadership style, his rationale for it, and the blind spots preventing him from recognizing its detrimental effects. As they parted ways, Richardson handed her another business card, this one from a different airline. "I don't usually do this," he said, "but if you're interested in aviation beyond this conversation, Meridian Airlines is looking for corporate consultants familiar with the industry. Their CEO is an old colleague of mine, and I'd be happy to put in a good word." Elena accepted the card with a grateful smile. "That's very kind of you, Captain. I'll certainly keep it in mind." She didn't mention that Globe Trend Enterprises had once considered acquiring Meridian before deciding on Skyward instead. The corporate world, much like the aviation industry, was smaller than most people realized. "Will you be on tomorrow's flight back to New York?" Richardson asked casually. "Yes, actually," Elena replied, "though in economy this time. My first-class ticket was an upgrade due to a scheduling issue with my original flight." Richardson nodded knowingly. "I'll make sure you're well taken care of, regardless of your seating assignment. It's been a pleasure, Miss Morales." "Likewise, Captain. I found our conversation most illuminating," she said. As she watched him walk away, Elena couldn't help but reflect on the complexity of the task ahead. Richardson wasn't a villain. He was a skilled professional whose leadership style had evolved into something that was now, unfortunately, damaging to the organization. His technical expertise was invaluable, perhaps even essential to Skyward's continued operation, but his management methods were poisoning the airline from within. The real question was whether he could adapt to the new culture Elena planned to implement. Elena spent hours finalizing her report for Globe Trends Board, recommending a cultural reset at Skyward, starting with its leadership. She identified key personnel, including Captain Richardson, David Mitchell, and Brittany Parker, whose future at Skyward depended on their willingness to embrace change. Mei Jiang, however, represented the type of talent the airline needed. After sending the report, Elena prepared for her new role as CEO, set to be announced on Monday. She reflected on the personas she had assumed to understand Skyward's culture, noting how people's treatment of her shifted based on perceived status, confirming the need for change. On her return flight, Elena observed David, Brittany, and May interacting with passengers. David and Brittany's dismissive behavior contrasted sharply with May's caring service, highlighting the cultural issues at Skyward. Elena took notes, completing her evaluation of the crew by the time the plane landed. On Monday, Elena was introduced as the new CEO of Skyward. She outlined her vision for transformation, emphasizing collaboration, respect, and accountability. She addressed the staff's resistance to change, making it clear that those unwilling to adapt would have limited opportunities. Elena's first act was to promote Mei Jiang, rewarding her consistent excellence. The transformation of Skyward had begun, and Elena was ready to lead, proving that actions would speak louder than titles in this new era.